People think betrayal always comes with noise, shouting, slamming doors, broken plates. But sometimes betrayal is quiet. It's a man sitting still while a woman stands in front of him, shaking, not from anger, but from the weight of something she carried for years alone. The restaurant was calm, too calm, the kind of upscale establishment where even bad news arrives on fine china, where conflicts dissolve into the soft clink of silverware and the murmur of polite conversation. Minjun sat at a corner table, his pregnant wife Ideal beside him. She wore a fitted burgundy dress that complemented her deep brown skin, her natural hair styled in elegant twists. Her hand rested protectively on her visible belly, a gesture so instinctive she didn't even realize she was doing it. They'd come here to celebrate. 7 months along, healthy baby, the nursery almost finished. Minjun had finally stepped back from the darker aspects of his business operations. After years of living in moral gray areas, the kind of work that required silence, compartmentalization, and a carefully constructed distance from normal life, he was building something clean, something real. That's when he saw her. Ji-won. His ex-girlfriend stood near their table, her face pale, her hands trembling slightly at her sides. She wasn't supposed to be here. How could she have known where to find him? Minjun, she said, her voice barely above a whisper but cutting through the ambient noise like a blade. Ideal looked up, her warm brown eyes moving from her husband to this unfamiliar woman. She sensed the shift in Minjun's posture, the way his shoulders tensed, the way his jaw tightened. Ji-won. His voice was carefully neutral, but Ideal heard something beneath it. History. Complication. I didn't come here to cause a scene, Ji-won said, placing her hand over her chest. Not for drama, but because her heart was beating too fast, too hard. I came because I couldn't keep living with what you let me believe. The words hung in the air. Ideal's hand instinctively moved to cover Minjun's on the table, a gesture of unity. But her eyes were questioning, searching his face for answers he clearly wasn't ready to give. You need to leave, Minjun said quietly. No. Ji-won's voice cracked. Not this time. I've left every other time you wanted silence instead of truth. Not anymore. She looked at Ideal then, really looked at her, at the belly, at the wedding ring, at the life Ji-won had convinced herself was built on manipulation and lies. I'm sorry, Ji-won said to Ideal, tears forming in her eyes. I'm so sorry for what I thought about you, for what I let myself believe. Ideal straightened in her chair, her Nigerian accent clear and firm. I don't know you, but if you have something to say it clearly. I don't appreciate cryptic accusations at my dinner table. There it was. Not weak, not passive, direct. Minjun closed his eyes briefly. When he opened them, there was resignation there. He'd always known this moment might come. He just hoped it wouldn't be here now like this. Tell her, Ji-won said, her voice breaking. Tell her what you let me believe about why you married her. About the baby. And that was when everything began to unravel. Now, before we get into what Ji-won believed, and trust me, it's worse than you think, I want to ask you something. Have you ever been in a situation where someone's silence hurt you more than their words ever could? Drop a comment and let me know. Because this story is about to show you just how dangerous assumptions can be when the truth is never spoken. And if you're invested in finding out what Minjun let his ex believe all these years, hit that subscribe button. You won't want to miss how this unfolds. The restaurant felt smaller suddenly, as if the walls had moved inward. Other diners continued their meals, oblivious to the emotional earthquake occurring at the corner table. Ideal's voice was measured, controlled. Minjun, who is this woman? My name is Park Ji-won, she said before he could answer. I was in a relationship with Minjun for 3 years. We broke up 4 years ago. I see. Ideal's expression didn't change, but her hand moved away from Minjun's. And you're here because? Because he never told me the truth, Ji-won said. About why we really ended. About what his life was actually like. And when I saw photos of your wedding, when I heard about the pregnancy, I convinced myself of something terrible. Minjun's voice was tight. Ji-won, stop. No. She looked at him with years of accumulated pain. You know what I thought? I thought you got her pregnant to legitimize yourself, to look respectable. I thought the whole marriage was strategic, a way to distance yourself from your past by creating this perfect family image. Ayadil's face remained impassive, but something flickered in her eyes. Not shock, recognition, as if she'd felt that distance herself and wondered about its source. I thought, Ji-won continued, her voice dropping, that she was just a means to an end for you, that the baby was an accident you turned into an opportunity. The words landed like stones in still water, sending ripples outward. Ayadil turned to her husband slowly. Is that what she believed? Minjun's silence was answer enough. And you knew she believed this? Ayadil continued, her voice dangerously quiet. And you never corrected her? I didn't know, Minjun said. Not exactly. We haven't spoken in years. But you suspected, Ji-won said. When I sent that message 2 years ago, asking if you ever actually loved me or if I was just another transaction, you never responded. You let me keep thinking the worst. Ayadil stood up slowly, her hand supporting her belly. Excuse me. I need a moment. Ayo. I said I need a moment. Her tone allowed no argument. She walked toward the restaurant's restroom with her head high, every inch of her posture radiating controlled dignity. But Minjun knew her well enough to see the slight tremor in her shoulders, the way she moved just a fraction faster than normal. When she was gone, Minjun finally looked at Ji-won directly. What do you want? I want the truth, she said. I deserve that much. The truth. His voice was low, dangerous in a way that reminded her why she'd once been drawn to him and frightened of him in equal measure. The truth is that I pushed you away because my life was incompatible with yours. The truth is that I was in deep with people who would have used you against me. The truth is that I chose your safety over our relationship, and I'd make that choice again. But you never said that. Ji-won's tears fell freely now. You just disappeared, changed your number, sent me money through a third party like I was someone you'd hired and fired. Because a clean break was safer. For who? She laughed bitterly. You? Because it certainly wasn't safe for my mental health. For 4 years, I've tortured myself with theories. And when I saw you'd married someone, had a baby on the way, I thought the worst possible thing. That I'd been too Korean, too connected to your old world, and you needed someone completely removed from that life.
Mignonet's expression shifted.
You thought I chose her because of her race? I thought you chose her because she was an outsider, because she couldn't have any ties to your world. I thought it was strategic. Ji-won's voice broke. And then I hated myself for thinking that way, for reducing your wife to a chess piece in my own narrative of rejection. You shouldn't have come here, Minjun said quietly. I know, Ji-won agreed. But I saw you together today by accident at the medical plaza. The way you looked at her when she wasn't paying attention. The way you held the door. And I realized none of my theories made sense. Because that wasn't strategy. That was real. She took a shaking breath. So I need to hear it from you. Why did you really marry her? Why did you have a child with her? Because if the answer is love, if the answer is something genuine, then I need to let go of 4 years of poison I've been carrying. Before Minjun could answer, Ayadil returned. Her eyes were dry, her makeup perfect. But there was something different about her now, a sharpness, a clarity. I've made a decision, she said calmly. We're going home. All 3 of us. Ji-won blinked. What? You want answers. I want answers. And my husband clearly has a lot of explaining to do. Ayadil looked at Minjun. The penthouse. Now, we're going to have a proper conversation, not a public spectacle. Minjun started to protest, but Ayadil's raised hand stopped him. This woman is in pain because of your silence, Ayadil said. I'm in confusion because of your silence. And you're sitting there like silence is still an option. She looked at Ji-won. Can you drive? Or do you need a few minutes? Ji-won stared at her. You're inviting me to your home? I'm inviting you to a conversation where the truth actually comes out, Ayadil corrected. Because whatever my husband thinks, silence doesn't protect anyone. It just delays the damage. The drive back was tense. Minjun drove while Ayodele sat beside him, Ji-won following in her own car. The city lights blurred past, each mile marker feeling like a countdown to something inevitable. The penthouse was exactly what Ji-won had imagined. Sleek, modern, expensive, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Tasteful art on the walls. But there were also signs of real life. Baby books stacked on the coffee table, paint swatches taped to the wall near what was obviously going to be the nursery. Ayodele's laptop open with what looked like architectural design software. Sit, Ayodele said, gesturing to the living room. She didn't sit herself, instead moving to the kitchen. I'm making tea. Everyone needs to calm down before this conversation happens. Minjun and Ji-won sat on opposite ends of the long sofa, the space between them feeling both too wide and too narrow. Your wife is, Ji-won started. Not what you expected?
Minjun finished.
Strong, Ji-won said quietly. Really strong. When Ayodele returned with 3 cups of tea, she sat in the chair facing them both. All right, let's establish some ground rules. First, no interrupting. Second, complete honesty. Third, we're all adults, so we can handle uncomfortable truths without theatrics. She looked at her husband. Minjun, I'm going to ask you questions. You're going to answer them truthfully. Then Ji-won will ask her questions. And then I'll decide what happens next. Ayo, do you agree to the ground rules? He nodded slowly. Good. Ayodele's hands were steady on her teacup. First question. When did you know you were in love with me? The question caught him off guard. What? You heard me. When did you know? Minjun was quiet for a long moment. 3 weeks after we met. You were presenting a building design to a room full of men who thought they knew better than you. You didn't raise your voice once, but by the end of the meeting, they'd approved your vision completely. You were brilliant and you didn't apologize for it. Ayodele's expression softened almost imperceptibly. Second question. When did you find out I was pregnant? The day you took the test. You called me from the bathroom, crying. And what was your reaction? Terror, he admitted. Then joy. Then more terror. Why terror? Because I didn't know if I could be the man you'd want raising your child. If I could leave my old life completely enough to be worthy of that responsibility. Ji-won listened, her tea forgotten. Watching this man she thought she'd known reveal himself in ways he never had with her. Third question, Ayodele continued. Did you marry me to create a legitimate image?
No.
The answer was immediate and firm. I married you because the idea of waking up without you felt unbearable. The pregnancy accelerated the timeline, but not the intention. Ayodele nodded slowly. Then she turned to Ji-won. Your turn. Ji-won set down her cup. Her hands were still trembling slightly. Why did you never tell me about your work? The real nature of it.
Minjun met's Herz.
Because the less you knew, the safer you were. People in my world use information as weapons. Use people as leverage. But you told Ayodele?
No. Ayodele interjected.
I found out myself. 6 months into our relationship, I did what any intelligent woman would do. I researched the man I was falling for. I found connections, patterns, rumors. And I confronted him directly. She looked at Minjun. He tried to break up with me right then. Said I deserved better. I told him I was perfectly capable of deciding what I deserved, and that what I wanted was the truth, not protection through ignorance. Ji-won absorbed this. So you knew everything and chose to stay? I knew enough, Ayodele said. And yes, I chose to stay, because he was also actively working to get out, to build something legitimate. I didn't fall in love with his past. I fell in love with his determination to leave it behind. Why her and not me? Ji-won's voice cracked on the question she'd been carrying for years. What made her different? Minjun was quiet for a long time. When he spoke, his voice was raw. Timing, circumstances, but also, she demanded the truth. You deserved it, but you never forced the issue. and I was a coward who took the easier path of silence. That's not fair to me, Ji-won said. You're right, he agreed. Nothing about how I handled our relationship was fair to you. I loved you, Ji-won, but I didn't trust you with the truth. Not because you weren't trustworthy, but because I wasn't brave enough to risk your judgment. You know, as I'm telling you this story, I keep thinking about how many of us have been on one side of this equation or the other. Either we've been the person waiting for answers that never came, or we've been the one who stayed silent because we thought it was easier. If this story is hitting close to home for you, let me know in the comments which character you relate to most. And if you're wondering how Ayodele is going to handle all of this, because let's be honest, she's been remarkably composed so far, make sure you're subscribed because what happens next is going to show you exactly why silence in a relationship is a ticking time bomb. Ayodele watched them both carefully. So all this time, Ji-won has been building theories based on silence. And you let her. I thought distance was kinder, Min-jun said. Distance without explanation is cruelty, Ayodele corrected. It leaves people to fill in the blanks with their worst fears. She stood up, moving to the window. The city sprawled below them, lights flickering like earthbound stars. I felt it too, you know, your silence. There are times when you disappear into your head, and I wonder if you're regretting this. Regretting me. Regretting the baby.
Min-jun stood abruptly.
Never. Ao, never. But you don't always say that, she said quietly, still facing the window. You get quiet when things are difficult. You retreat. And I'm left wondering what you're thinking, what you're feeling, if I've done something wrong. You haven't. I know that here. She touched her head. But when you're silent, I question it here. She touched her heart. Ji-won watched this exchange, seeing her own experience reflected. That's exactly what happened to me. Your silence became a canvas for my insecurities. Ayodele turned back to face them both. So here's what's going to happen. Min-jun, you're going to tell Ji-won everything you should have said 4 years ago. The real reason you ended things. The danger you were trying to protect her from. The feelings you actually had. All of it. Ao. I'm not asking, Ayodele said firmly. This woman has carried a burden that belongs to you. You're going to take it back. And then she's going to leave here with closure, not confusion. She looked at Ji-won. And you're going to listen. Really listen. Not to defend yourself or justify your assumptions, but to finally understand what actually happened. And what about you? Ji-won asked. I'm going to sit here and learn about the man I married, Ayodele said. Because clearly there are parts of his story I don't fully know either. They talked for hours. Min-jun spoke about his past in ways he never had before, not in broad strokes but in specific details. The deals that had compromised his ethics. The people he'd worked with who scared him. The moment he realized he was in too deep and needed an exit strategy. When I met you, he said to Ji-won, I was already planning to get out, but it takes time to extract yourself from that world. You don't just quit. You slowly transfer responsibilities, create distance, build alternative income streams. It's a process that takes years. You never told me any of this, Ji-won said. Because I didn't want you waiting for me, he admitted. Didn't want you building your life around a version of me that might never fully materialize. What if I failed to get out? What if I got pulled back in? I didn't want you caught in that. So you just left. I broke up with you in the most final way possible. Changed my number, moved, sent money so you wouldn't be financially disadvantaged. I thought I was being merciful. You were being a coward, Ayodele said bluntly. Love isn't protecting someone from reality. It's trusting them with the truth and respecting their agency to make their own choices.
Min-jun nodded slowly.
I know that now, but 4 years ago, I was convinced that secrecy was safety. Ji-won wiped her eyes. I thought you didn't love me enough, that I wasn't important enough to fight for. You were too important, he said quietly. That was the problem. The people I worked with, they noticed you, started asking questions. One of them made a comment about your apartment location, your routine. That's when I knew I had to end it completely. Someone threatened me? Indirectly. But in that world, indirect threats are the most serious kind. Ji-won was quiet, processing. And Ayadil? Was she safer somehow? I met Ayadil 2 years later, Minjun said. By then, I was almost completely out. Different business, different circle, different life. The danger was minimal. Plus, Ayadil added, when he tried to use the "you're too good for me" line, I shut it down immediately. Told him to respect my intelligence enough to give me the facts and let me make informed decisions. You're different people, Ji-won said, not unkindly. I probably would have accepted the breakup if you'd given me a reason, even a partial truth. I'm not. I don't push the way she does. That's not a weakness, Ayadil said firmly. But it meant Minjun could take the coward's way out with you in a way he couldn't with me. She looked at her husband. You need to understand something. Silence isn't strength. Silence isn't protection. Silence is just absence. And absence creates voids that people fill with their worst fears and assumptions. I understand that now, Minjun said. Do you? Ayadil's voice was sharp. Because I felt it too. The distance. The times when you retreat into yourself instead of talking to me. I'm 7 months pregnant. Minjun. I need a partner who communicates. Not one who thinks silence is safety. You're right, he said quietly. About all of it. Ji-won stood up slowly. I should go. Wait, Ayadil said. She moved closer, her hand on her belly. I need you to understand something. This baby, this marriage, is not perfect. We're not perfect. But it's real. It's chosen. Every day we choose it. She paused. I'm sorry you didn't get that choice. I'm sorry he took it away from you with his silence. You deserved better. Ji-won's eyes filled with tears again. I thought terrible things about you. About your baby. I convinced myself you'd trapped him, that the pregnancy was strategic. I hated you without knowing you. I forgive you, Ayadil said simply, because I understand what it's like to fill in blanks with fear. The two women looked at each other. Past and present, different but somehow understanding each other in this moment. Thank you, Ji-won whispered, for your grace, for your strength, for making him talk. Don't thank me yet, Ayadil said with a slight smile. He's got a lot of conversations ahead of him if he wants to keep this marriage healthy. Ji-won gathered her things. At the door, she turned back to Minjun. I don't forgive you yet. Maybe I will someday. But at least now I know the truth. And that's more than I had before. I don't expect forgiveness, he said. But I am sorry. Truly. She nodded and left. When the door closed, the silence that followed was different from before. Heavier. More honest. Ayadil moved to the sofa, lowering herself carefully. The baby kicked, and she placed her hand over the movement instinctively.
Minjun sat beside her, not touching, waiting.
I'm angry, she said finally. I know. Not about Ji-won. About what this revealed. About the pattern of silence. I know, he said again. I need you to promise me something, Ayadil said, looking at him directly. No more protection through silence. No more assuming you know what's best for me. I'm an adult. I'm your partner. And I deserve the truth, even when it's hard. I promise, he said. That's not enough, she said quietly. I need you to understand why it's important. This baby we're having, they're going to need a father who models communication, who shows them that love includes honesty, that trust is built through transparency, not through protective silence. She placed her hand over his. I chose you knowing your past, but I can only choose you in the future if I know your present. All of it, even the uncomfortable parts. You're right, Minjun said. About everything. I've been carrying this idea that silence is strength, that withholding is protection. But it's just fear. Fear of judgment. Fear of rejection. Fear of being fully known. And what are you more afraid of? Ayadil asked. Being fully known? Or losing me because you refuse to be? The question landed. Losing you, he admitted. Losing this. He gestured between them, around them, to the life they'd built. Then start talking, she said. Not just tonight, but every day. When you're scared. When you're overwhelmed. When you're uncertain about fatherhood or business or anything else. I can't read your mind, Minjun. I can only respond to what you share. He was quiet for a moment, then spoke. I'm terrified I'm going to fail as a father, that my past will somehow contaminate our child's future. That the version of me I've built with you is just a veneer and the old version will emerge under stress. Ayadil listened without interrupting. I'm scared that when the baby comes, you'll see me differently, he continued. That I won't know how to connect with them. That I'll fall back into old patterns of emotional distance because it's what I know. Thank you, Ayadil said softly, for saying that. That's it? Just thank you. What did you expect? For me to leave you because you're afraid? She shook her head.
Everyone is afraid, Minjun.
The difference is whether you let that fear isolate you or whether you share it with the people who love you. She leaned against him, and he wrapped his arm around her shoulders. We're going to make mistakes, both of us. But we can't fix what we don't acknowledge. What do we do about G1? He asked. Nothing, Ayadil said. We gave her the truth. That's all we owe her. The rest of her healing is hers to do. They sat in silence for a while, but this silence was different. Not the silence of avoidance, but the silence of two people comfortable enough to simply be together. The baby's kicking, Ayadil said. Minjun placed his hand on her belly, feeling the movement. Strong. Like their mother, he said. And hopefully more emotionally communicative than their father. Ayadil replied. But there was humor in her voice now. I'm working on it, he promised. I know, she said. That's why I'm still here. The nursery was finished. Soft yellow walls, white furniture, children's books already lining a small shelf. Ayadil stood in the doorway, her hands supporting her very pregnant belly, surveying the room with satisfaction. Minjun came up behind her, resting his chin on her shoulder. Ready as anyone can be, she said. In the months since Ji-won's visit, something had shifted between them. Minjun had made a conscious effort to verbalize his thoughts, his fears, his feelings. It wasn't perfect. Years of learned silence don't disappear overnight. But it was better. Honest attempts instead of protective distance. I got an email, he said. From G1. Ayadil turned to look at him. And she's in therapy, working through everything. She said. He paused, pulling out his phone to read directly. Thank you for finally giving me the truth. It hurt more than the silence in some ways, but at least now I can heal from reality instead of assumptions. I hope your family is happy. I genuinely mean that. That's good, Ayadil said. Real closure. She also said she's dating someone new. Someone who apparently won't shut up about his feelings. Ayadil laughed. Perfect match then. They stood together in the nursery, imagining the life that would soon fill the space. The sleepless nights, the first smiles, the challenges neither of them could fully predict. I'm still scared, Minjun admitted. Me too, Ayadil said. But we're scared together, and that makes all the difference. The baby kicked hard, making them both jump slightly. They're ready to meet us, Ayadil said. Then I guess we'd better be ready to meet them, Minjun replied. 2 weeks later, their daughter was born. 6 pounds, 7 ounces. Healthy lungs that she used liberally to announce her presence to the world. They named her Zuri Minesio, a name that honored both her heritages, both her parents' histories. In those first exhausting, overwhelming, beautiful weeks of parenthood, Minjun discovered something. Every time Zuri cried and he didn't understand why, every time he felt inadequate or uncertain, he had to ask for help, had to communicate, had to admit he didn't have all the answers. Silence wasn't an option with an infant. She demanded response, attention, acknowledgement. And in meeting those demands, he learned what Ayadil had been trying to teach him all along. That vulnerability isn't weakness. That asking for help isn't failure. That love requires presence, not perfection. One night, 3 weeks in, Ayadil found him standing over the crib watching Zuri sleep. What are you thinking? she asked softly. That I was wrong about silence, he said. I thought it protected people, but it just isolated everyone. And now I know that the bravest thing I can do is tell the truth, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. Ideal wrapped her arms around him from behind. You're learning. We're both learning, he corrected. Zuri stirred in her sleep, making small sounds. They watched her together, two people choosing each day to be honest, to be present, to build something real. Because in the end, that's what love requires. Not grand gestures, not perfect protection, just truth. Consistent, uncomfortable, necessary truth. The kind of truth that Minjun had finally learned to offer. The kind of truth that had shattered Ji-won's false assumptions and freed her to heal. The kind of truth that Ideal demanded and deserved. The kind of truth that would teach their daughter how to build authentic relationships instead of beautiful lies. Sometimes the cruelest thing a man can do isn't what he says. It's what he allows others to believe. Minjun had learned this the hard way. Through losing Ji-won to assumptions he never corrected. Through nearly losing Ideal to patterns he refused to acknowledge. Through confronting the reality that silence, no matter how well-intentioned, causes more damage than difficult truths. Ji-won had come to that restaurant carrying years of poison built from the absence of information. She'd created entire narratives about Ideal, about the pregnancy, about Minjun's motivations, all because he'd given her silence instead of explanation. And Ideal had felt the effects of that same silence. The emotional distance, the retreat into self-protection, the assumption that withholding information was somehow loving. But here's what Minjun finally understood. Love isn't about shielding people from reality. It's about trusting them with the truth and respecting their agency to make informed choices. Ji-won deserved to know why he'd really left. Not to get her back, but to free her from the stories she'd created to make sense of the silence. Ideal deserved to know his fears about fatherhood. Not to solve them for him, but to walk through them together. And Zuri would deserve to grow up in a home where emotions were named, where difficult conversations happened, where love included honesty. Because silence doesn't protect anyone. It only delays the damage. And sometimes, the bravest thing you can do is simply tell the truth, knowing that the person you love deserves reality more than they deserve your protection from it. Minjun had spent years believing he was strong because he could carry burdens alone. But real strength was admitting he didn't have to. That partnership meant sharing weight, not shouldering it in silence. He'd caused real harm with his protective distance. To Ji-won, who'd spent years believing she wasn't enough. To Ideal, who'd questioned her worth in moments of his withdrawal. To himself, who'd isolated himself in the name of strength. But healing begins with acknowledgement, with truth, with the willingness to be fully known, even when that knowledge might bring judgment. And in choosing truth over silence, Minjun had found something better than the illusion of protection. He'd found real connection, real partnership, real love, the kind that doesn't require perfection, just presence. The kind that doesn't demand invulnerability, just honesty. The kind that builds something strong enough to withstand difficult truths. Because in the end, the strongest relationships aren't built on what we hide from each other. They're built on what we're brave enough to share.